Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that's 8 lessons from my most previous fat loss phase. I think it'll be super helpful for a lot of people. But first, before I dive into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you're sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. And there's also at least 1 to 2 bottlenecks that we figure out that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. And this is outside of the training and nutrition protocol. So these are things that people often overlook, right? Like you just think, oh, I need to train harder. I need to just eat less. But usually there's 1 or 2 things outside of that keeping you from seeing the results you want to see. And obviously the coaching, we dive into that and figure out what that is. And this usually is holding somebody back more than they think. So if you're interested in that, I have a link in the show notes to check out my services. You can check that out, see if it's something you'd be interested in, or you can reach out to me on Instagram and reach out with any questions you may have regarding the coaching. If you're not interested in that, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan over the next couple months. Again, the link to that is in the show notes. And then lastly, if you want to learn more about a body recomp, I have my 75-minute masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it, and you can find a link to that in the show notes. So next, if you can follow me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_, that's where I'm most active on social media. Instagram's honestly been terrible lately, getting like absolutely no reach. Is that my content? Who knows? But either way, would love a follow on there and whatnot. Plus, that's where I'm most active, and you can reach out to me with any questions and or ask any questions when I do my Q&A. And then lastly, if you found this podcast be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. So with that out of the way, I want to dive into today's topics. I mentioned follow me on Instagram, and on there, I obviously post my training and stuff like that and things that I'm doing. And I haven't on here on the podcast really posted too much about that, but I did just wrap up my 2023 fat loss phase. So just to give you some like overview here of it real quick, just so you have an understanding. And if you want to learn more, you can go to my Instagram and I have my pictures and everything like that. And so I wrapped it up. I went from 168.5 pounds on average. So that was my weekly average to 153.7 in about 13 and a half weeks there with that. And so just dieted through. The goal here was I just needed to run a fat loss phase. It had been a while since I ran a fat loss phase. Plus I have my wedding and then honeymoon coming up. I want to show off some of my physique and progress that I've made over the last couple of years and everything like that. The last time we went on like a trip like this, I was a little I was like at the top end of my building phase, so my look wasn't as great as it could have been. And I just want to feel a little bit more comfortable there on that. But also just it was time to run a fat loss phase, so it all lined up pretty perfectly. And then now my goal until a wedding honeymoon, which is as of today, it's 10/11. My honeymoon's wedding's 11/11. I'm going to eat at maintenance calories to fill back out a bit while maintaining most of my leanness. Just because as you diet down, you start to get depleted, you just look skinny, and then once you start eating back up, you can really fill back out. However, I'm planning on eating around maintenance, so I shouldn't see weight come up too much there on that. And then after the honeymoon, I will go into a small surplus and focus on adding muscle. In this episode today, I want to go over some lessons I learned from this 2023 fat loss phase. So I have 8. So again, wrapped up gave you my overview there on that. First lesson here, diet breaks / refeeds are a great tool. So I implemented more diet breaks / refeed days this time around. Real quick on diet breaks and refeeds, they're not going to magically speed up fat loss, but they can be great from a mental standpoint, training perspective, and your look as you diet down. I thought of them more as like deloads, and this seemed to help take off some fatigue from dieting mentally and physically. Just like a deload from training helps with those things. I never really thought of them that way, but when you're training, it's like you need a deload every once in a while. So same thing with dieting. As you're just low calorie, you keep going down and down, your body's going to accumulate some fatigue from that mentally and physically. And it just made sense to me. Hey, why don't I just try and implement a little bit more of these? I know in the research, they don't magically speed up fat loss, but they've been super helpful to help with adherence, and mainly adherence is a big thing, right? It can help make the diet a little bit more sustainable long-term. Now, obviously those are days you're not in a deficit that could slow things down slightly. But I think from a body composition standpoint, I do think it helped. I think having these periods of times where you just deplete, right, for whatever that time frame is. Again, it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks at a time, 2 to 6 weeks, even longer, right? Just see how you feel, see how training is, etc. Deplete yourself out, and then take a refeed couple refeed days or a diet break, right? And that can help fill you back out, mentally give you a break from dieting, and then boom, you're refreshed, ready to go. That was one thing I changed, or one thing that I thought about in this fat loss phase is you can set out for a week-long diet break, you can set out for 5 days, whatever it is, but you don't necessarily have to stick to that, right? Maybe you set out for a week, but then 3 to 5 days in, you're like, man, I feel good. Get back to the deficit. It probably did what it needed to do there. But again, I think from a body composition standpoint, especially the leaner and leaner you are, I think these can be super helpful there, right? Because then you deplete yourself and then you replenish a little bit with a couple days at your maintenance calories. And then boom, now training improves for a little bit and your body's more glycogen storage, things like that. But it can be definitely something that you want to look at implementing in yours. How I would do it is go to maintenance, set your calories to your maintenance, and just add mostly via carbohydrate. You could do some fats and protein if you want, but probably be best to just add in some carbohydrates there on that. You do want to be careful with not going crazy with it and getting into a large surplus. But if you can get back to your maintenance for a couple of days, that can do wonders and help extend that. Basically, make it higher quality at the times that you are dieting. So that's lesson 1. Lesson 2, keeping things as similar as you can from day to day. I think this is key. You don't have to eat the exact same thing every day. However, the more you can keep similar from day to day, the better. I just see too many people when they go into fat loss, they try to change things up too often. I look at their food log and say, man, you just have no consistency here. Things are different every single day. And that's fine. It can work, but it makes things more challenging. So some examples here of how you can keep things similar from day to day, where it's not like the exact same meal every single time. Eating 1 to 2 meals that are the same every day. For example, like my breakfast and pre-workout meal were relatively the same the entire fat loss phase. Again, it's easy. I know what the serving size is. I don't have to think about it. It's easy to track, etc. So having those 1 to 2 meals that are the same each day can help give you a good baseline and foundation. Eating the same amount of meals per day. This is one that I do recommend. So I ate 4 meals per day. And again, that takes a lot of guesswork out. It's, hey, I know I'm eating around this time, and then I'm going to eat around my workouts, and then I eat at that time. And that can help you be okay with some hunger, because you know when your next meal is coming, versus if you're just random with it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm hungry now, so now I'm going to eat just because I'm hungry. So you're a little bit more reactive to that hunger, and that obviously can be detrimental to staying in a caloric deficit. So making sure you're eating the same amount of meals per day and trying to line them up relatively similar from day to day. Some people don't have that luxury, but if you can stick to the same amount of meals, maybe you have to change it around a little bit, but that can be super helpful there. Having a rotation of meals that you use. Maybe you don't necessarily have every single meal be the same, but you have a rotation of 4 to 6 meals. So at any one time, you just rotate in them. You have 2 meals that you're not eating for a little bit of time. You start to miss those a little bit. Get sick of a couple meals, boom, in and out, but it's the same stuff. It can take a lot of guesswork out. Now you already have 1 to 2 meals that are same. You're eating the same meals per day. There's a lot more structure here. And again, with these fat loss phases, they don't have to necessarily be super long, which makes that a little bit more sustainable. Plus, the more consistent you can keep it, the more you can be flexible during certain times as well. So I had some weekends where we had events. Obviously, things are going to be a little less structured then, but because the structure I had the rest of the time, the other 90%, it's like that gives you a little bit more room there to be flexible during that period of time. Another example here of keeping things the same is going grocery shopping on the same day of the week. That's just a simple thing. Okay, I know that I'm running low, but I'm going grocery shopping tomorrow. Sunday and Wednesday are my grocery days. That's when I'm going. And that takes a lot of guesswork out of. I didn't have anything prepared because I didn't have food there. It's like, that shouldn't be the case, right? You shouldn't run into that issue. So trying to keep things as similar as you can from day to day are going to be key. Lesson 3, have a general idea for when you'll stop. You don't necessarily need to have an exact date. I used to think that, right? And this may be more helpful if there's a vacation or event that you do need to be ready for. Obviously, you'll have to have an end date there. But however, I think it's better to have a range of dates to stop versus an exact date. Reason being is if things are going well, why would you stop? So if things are trending down, you can keep going. You don't necessarily have to cut the fat loss phase off because, they say 16 weeks is the most you want to go. If you're feeling good, push it out another week or 2 and see. Or if they aren't going well, why keep pushing? It's, I got to get to 16 weeks. No, you don't have to do that, right? Now, there's obviously certain situations where you do need to be on top of it you need to push through. If you have to cut weight for an event or something like that, like you're going to have to push through. But if you don't, it's like, why would you keep doing that? It's like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. May have said that wrong. If so, you can make fun of me, whatever it may be. So I think having a range, because you want to have a range, just because you also don't want to get into that endless, like never ending 1 foot in, 1 foot out fat loss phase where it's like, oh, I didn't have a great week, I'm going to push it out one more week. Okay. Obviously, if you keep stringing together weeks like that, you just need to end the fat loss phase. You're ready to end it versus, oh, I'm going to go one more week. I didn't have a great week. I'm going to go another week. Yeah, I was adherent only 3 days last week, but I'm going to go one more. Now I'm adherent 5 days. You're just 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We do want to avoid that, but I don't think you need to put a hard cutoff date unless you obviously have to with a vacation or something like that. Otherwise, give it some time, give yourself a range. So for example, I gave myself a 2 to 3 week range of this is when I'm going to end it. It was like October 2nd through like the 16th. Sometime around then, I'm going to end it just to see how I feel. I got to the point to where I was getting pretty hungry. Training was starting to suffer. Libido was lower. I just wasn't feeling as great. I was getting a little irritated. I was like, you know what? I'm done. There's no need to keep pushing this through. I'm as lean as I need to be. Let's just end the fat loss phase. Keep that in mind. Lesson 4, training sucks compared to maintenance / building muscle phases. You still need to train hard to maintain your muscle, but training just feels tougher and there's less motivation overall. And training is just so much better at maintenance, calories or higher. You're just able to progress more. You get a better pump. You just feel good in your training versus like when you're in a fat loss diet, you just feel depleted. You can't push yourself. Everything just seems a little bit tougher. And that makes sense in terms of what it takes to build muscle. We know it's a little bit tougher in a deficit, whereas at maintenance, a small surplus, it's a little bit easier. And again, it's just the amount of calories that you have coming in. So training definitely suffers. For some people, though, they don't have this effect. I had a client be like, hey, am I doing something wrong? I didn't necessarily feel that way. And that's not the case. Now, you might want to look at your fueling strategies during your building phases or maintenance phases. If I don't think there's anything wrong from a training perspective in a fat loss phase. However, I would look into your like maintenance phase when you're at maintenance calories or surplus. I would look into your training and be like, okay, if you don't feel any better with this, it's like, could we eat a little bit more carbohydrate? Could we make better food choices? Could we time our nutrition around our workouts a little bit better? Those would be things that I would be potentially looking at there on that. So lesson 5, make sure you're tracking data. Don't just weigh in randomly every few days and then judge what you do based on that and then think that's enough data to track, right? I do think you should track your scale weight. I think it's vitally important for trying to figure out the energy balance that you're in. But if you just track that, it's like you're going to get a lot of noise there. And if you're not tracking other things with it, you're going to run into some issues here in your fat loss phase. So like I said, weigh in, but make sure you have a system with it and also track. So for example, and also track these things. I'll talk about what those are. With the system, the weighing in system, don't just randomly weigh in. Hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm weighing in first thing in the morning, post bathroom, pre-food or drink. Like we want to get a system and some consistency down with that as well too. I would say if worst case is you just don't weigh in at all. Second worst case is you just randomly, honestly, I would almost say that just random weigh-ins are going to be even worse case than that. Probably, I would say we're talking bad to better here. Bad, worst case is you just randomly weigh in. There's just one day you weigh in the morning, next day you weigh in at 2 p.m. It's random, etc. It's different scales. That's worst case scenario. I just wouldn't even weigh in at that point. Second worst is just not even weighing in at all. And then third is having a system, but also not tracking anything else, right? Like it's a little bit better than those other two, but also just by itself, it's probably not the greatest metric, right? We also want to track other things: hunger, energy levels, training, steps, progress pics, measurements, right? So make sure we're tracking other data, calorie intake. These are all things that we want to make sure we're tracking here in this process to see. Otherwise, it's really going to be hard to know if you're dropping body fat at that point. So make sure you track data. Lesson 6, hunger is a good sign. If you aren't ever hungry or just eat when you feel hungry, fat loss is going to be tough to come by, as hunger is a good sign fat loss is happening. Now, this doesn't mean you should be ravenously hungry 24/7, as you do want strategies in place to mitigate hunger. But if you aren't okay with any amount of hunger, you're going to struggle. So hunger is a good thing and it can be challenging, right? So it's a weird situation to be in. If you're never hungry at all, like you're probably not dropping body fat, unfortunately, if you're always feeling satiated. So that's not great. However, hunger's low, so it's easier to manage. But the other side of it is we do want some hunger. So you do have to learn how to be comfortable with that. If you're not okay with any amount of hunger, you're going to struggle, right? I hear a lot of people be like, oh, I'm just going to have snacks ready for when I get hungry. And I don't think that is a good thought process. I just feel like you're setting yourself up for failure there. Learning how to be a little hungry and being okay with that is a great skill to be able to have. And you don't have to do it all the time, but learning how to do that really can help with your body composition long term. If you, again, are somebody that needs to be eating, you're not comfortable with any amount of hunger, you're just really going to have a hard time losing body fat at that point. So super important there. So again, hunger is a good sign. We obviously want to mitigate it. We want strategies in place to where you're not just ravenously hungry throughout the day, but no hunger is not great either. So yeah. Lesson 6, going more than 0.75% to 1% of body weight per week just isn't feasible for most. At this point, I would consider myself a seasoned dieter. This isn't long. I've been doing this. Like I've gone through many fat loss phases. I've coached many people on it. Like I have a general good idea of what needs to be done. Okay. And my habits are, I love this stuff. So it like makes it easier. This is what I do for a living. So I definitely have some experience here with this. And like, I lost around 0.75% of my body weight per week. And towards the end, training wasn't as great. Hunger was higher. Everything tasted amazing. And this can make adherence very challenging. Okay. If you aren't a seasoned, quote unquote, seasoned dieter, this is going to make this process 100 times more challenging. So losing more per week is going to be tough. Now, yes, I do think the body fat that you're at is going to play a big role. Somebody who maybe you're losing closer to 1% of body weight per week, but you're relatively overweight, you have a lot of body fat to lose. Because you have that more body fat, you're probably going to be able to go a little bit quicker with it. However, anything more than that, you are going to run into some issues here, right? And adherence is going to be challenging. We just talked about hunger. It's a good thing, but we don't want to be super hungry. The quicker you go, the more hungry you are, the more likely you are to go off track. And then also on top of it, like things just taste really good. So if you're not aware of this, it's going to be easy to overeat. Because trust me, there were some things I ate and I was like, man, if I wasn't aware of what the hell is going on, I would freaking just overeat the hell out of this right now because it tastes so good. And then you're hungry on top of it. Energy levels are low. So you just have all these things fighting you, pushing you away from that fat loss. So you really have to dig deep into that uncomfortableness, right? This is one like kind of lesson that I've learned through fitness and nutrition over the years is like that uncomfortableness, pushing like kind of leaning into that a little bit is super important here to really make change, right? So whether that be a whole ton of different lessons here, like when training for muscle growth, like if you're never getting to that point in your reps and sets where it's like, oh man, I really don't want to do this. It's going to be hard. I have to push through this. You're probably not building as much muscle as you want to. If you're not leaning into this hunger and like pushing through that, hey, I really want to eat this, but I'm not going to, you're probably going to have a tough time losing body fat over time, or even maintaining it as well. Doing like podcasts and giving like talks, leaning into that. Like, hey, this is super uncomfortable. I really don't want to do this, but there's a lot of growth there with that. Same type of thing here. But if you're not aware of some of these things when it comes to the dieting side of things, it can be very challenging to stick with it. So that's why I think anything more than 0.75 to 1% of body weight per week is just going to be just too challenging for people to do if they don't have the prerequisite experience and skills and whatnot doing it. So really think about slowing down. And then lastly, going quicker is also going to risk lean body mass loss, which is just going to make everything that much worse. Hunger higher, lower energy levels, more likely to regain weight, and just not even in your look being worse off as well too. And then lastly, lesson 8, avoid grazing, or I'll just have one. As you lose more weight and get leaner, you will notice hunger and cravings pick up, like I talked about. So making it nearly impossible to just have one. Just avoid it altogether and stick to your normal meal times and regular meals. So just avoid that grazing. I can't stress this enough. Oh, I'm just going to have one. Look, when you're dieting for even a couple days, that stuff's going to taste freaking great, and you're just not going to be able to have one. Again, this comes back to that experience that I just talked about. I know what to expect. And again, this isn't me like bragging about any of this. I'm just giving you my experience here. I just know that if I do have one, it's going to be really challenging to stick to that. So when I was making this post, the thing that I thought about was we had some kettle popcorn, and it's pretty sweet, tasty, and whatnot, sweet and salty, even worse. And I remember I was like, I'm just going to have one. I had one. I was like, oh my God, I freaking want more. But again, I knew what was going on. I knew why I wanted more. And so I was able to, again, lean into that discomfort there. But again, if somebody has that, I could see somebody who doesn't have the experience with it and the enjoyment that I do out of it, it's going to be tough to say no to that. So I think it's just better to say no to these things versus just grazing and whatnot. And again, that comes back to just being okay with some hunger is going to be key, and leaning into that and working through that is going to be key. Those are my 8 lessons from this fat loss phase. I hope this helps you in your fat loss phases. If you guys have any questions on this, follow me on Instagram, ask me a question. But that's it for now. I will talk to you guys next time.